1800s that a gentleman by the name of Alfred Lloyd Tennyson invited this Russian noble to come and stay at his estate. And early one morning, the nobleman got up and got his guns and his dogs and servants, and they went out hunting. And later on that day, he came back, and Lord Tennyson asked him, he said, how'd your day go? Did you get anything? He said, I got 2 peasants. He said, he laughed and said, well, around here, we pronounce that with a f. Pheasants. You got 2 pheasants. And he said, no. He said, I got 2 peasants. I was riding down the road and they were rude to me. And I shot them. Now, that's a little bit comical, except if it were happening today, right? But it does happen today, doesn't it? That we're quick to anger. Road rage is unbelievable these days. You're afraid to even look in the next car that you might get shot. I remember hearing a story that happened up around Philadelphia about a gentleman who was in, you know how those, when they're working on the roads and you got to narrow it down and traffic backs up for miles and miles and forever. If you want to know what eternity looks like, look down that road. That's what eternity looks like. Anyway, so you wait your turn, and everybody's waiting their turn to get through. And you know there's always that guy, right? You know what I mean? You know that guy. That guy that can't wait his turn. And today there was that guy. There was a man who was just about to go through into the single lane, and up comes the side, on the side of the road. Sometimes if there's a 2-lane, they just shoot up that side. Truck drivers have taken care of that, where they straddle the road now so that people can't shoot up the side. But he was shooting up the dirt. I mean, up the side, just boogieing, and he cut in right before that guy and looked at him and smirked and gave him a little hand gesture that I'm sure indicated he was number 1 or something of that. But went on, and this guy went through on his turn, and they went up to the next time that the road again got down small, and this guy was in front of him, and they came to a stop and waited, and that guy got out of his car with his gun and shot him dead. So people still experience anger today, don't they? Isn't it something that we would kill somebody over something? I mean, that's aggravating, and don't get me wrong, and you might think it, but can you imagine that we would kill somebody over something so silly? I say, yeah, because I've wanted to many times. But you've never done it. Nobody's ever done it, right? We're good. Just checking. Sometimes you need to check your audience to make sure who you're talking to. But anger exists. And anger is not a good thing. No matter how we put it, no matter how we describe it, anger is, well, it can be used in a positive way. But overall, anger is not something that we should hold in or hold on to, even though we're going to experience it, aren't we? Have you ever been angry? Yeah. If you said no, you're lying. That's something else we got to talk about later. But everybody gets angry at some point. Now, some people are better at handling it than others, right? Some people know how to control their anger, and some people just fly off the handle, right? And express their anger. And some people say, well, if you're angry, you're just not Christian. That's not true. You see, God gave us that emotion, just like He gave us sorrow and He gave us joy. Those are all emotions that we're meant to experience. He didn't give us something that we couldn't use, but it's how we use it that's important. How we experience that anger is what's key. You follow what I'm saying? So even Jesus got angry, right? We have several accounts in the Bible that Jesus was not, well, He was not happy with people, to say the least, right? So I think to say that anger is not Christian would be a falsehood. Because again, I say, God gave us that. But what are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with that? And what are the appropriate ways to deal with anger? Well, first we need to understand there's several types of anger. That sudden anger. What does God say about that? In Proverbs 14:17, he says, a quick-tempered man does foolish things. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Have you ever just flown off the handle and said something you wanted back? You know, that somebody says something and you're like, man, I should have thought before I said that. That was not good. And sometimes we just blame it on things like, well, I couldn't help it. It's my red hair. I just get mad. Redheaded people get mad. Quick, we can't control our tempers. Or I'm Irish. Us Irish, we just get mad. That's what we do. You just better be good with it. Or Spanish or Cuban. My mom has a nice Cuban temper that you never want to see. I'm going to just tell you. She's calm until she's not. And Spanish people scare me anyway. I remember being around my grandparents. First time I went to see my Spanish relatives, and they're talking. And have you ever? I couldn't tell if they were mad or not. They talk so fast, and they're so passionate when they talk. I couldn't tell if they were mad or not. But it was enough to scare you a little bit, just until you try to figure it out what they're saying. But a lot of times we do that, don't we? We blame it on, oh, I can't help it. I can't help it. I'm Cuban. I can't help it. I'm a redhead. I can't help it. I'm Irish. You can help it. You can help it. You just choose not to. You just choose not to control your temper. The other thing is there's sinful anger. Now, what's sinful anger? What do you think that is? What do you think is sinful anger? Anyone? Sinful anger is when you don't even have a legitimate reason to be mad. You're just mad. Ain't you just been mad? Had a bad day? I'm just mad. I'm waiting for somebody to knock this chip off my shoulder because I can't wait to go off. Somebody say something. Anybody. I don't care. That's that sinful anger. You're just angry. You don't have a reason. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You're just angry. I know people who are angry all the time. I know people who live to be angry. As a matter of fact, they're in their good place when they're angry. That's the place they're most comfortable for. You know anybody like that? I know people like that. Truly I do. I'm not looking at anybody in particular. I'm just saying. I know people in general in my life like that. Okay? So if you're going to be angry, you need to have what? A reason to be angry. If you don't have a reason to be angry, if you're just going around looking for a fight all the time, that's sinful. That's not what God desires for your life, is it? Is it? No. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure y'all still there. Because when we do that, we're focusing on something different. We're focusing on what? We're focusing on a person. In other words, I'm just waiting for the right person to come along, right? I'm just waiting for that person to come along. We shouldn't be angry with people. We should be angry with actions. We should be angry with what they do, not so much with the person. You see, if someone cuts you off, you should be angry because you got cut off. But you shouldn't be angry so much at the person. You see, Jesus was angry at actions, but he wasn't angry at people. Does that make sense? He was angry with their sin, but he didn't keep him from loving those people. Sometimes our anger keeps us from loving people and treating people with respect and dignity. You know, what's that saying? Hate the sin, but love the sinner.
Love the person.
Yeah.
Hate the sin.
That's right. And that's what it is. We're supposed to love people and not like the actions they're taking. You can still love people. You know, there are Democrats that just hate Republicans because they're Republicans. And there are Republicans who just hate Democrats because they're Democrats. You know, don't need a real reason just because there's a label stuck there. They just hate them. I just don't like them. And no, you don't have to even agree with them. As a matter of fact, you're going to find most things you don't agree with them on. it's okay. You can still love that person. Right? Right?
Right.
Right. Okay. Just making sure you're with me. You know, when you get angry with someone, these are the questions you should ask yourself. Is that anger directed towards a person or an action? Is that anger justifiable? Does that anger seek vengeance? You know, revenge. That thing we like to get. Is that anger, is it an anger that's cherished? You know, that one you want to hold on to? You know, I like being angry, so I'm going to hold on to this a few days. I'm going to work it. I'll work it for all I can get. Or is it that anger with an unforgiving spirit? In other words, no matter what you do, I'm not going to forgive you. I'm not letting it go. We are now enemies for life. I know people like that too. Maybe you've experienced that in some of your relationships. Something was said in anger. Something was done in anger. And now you haven't talked to that person in 20 years. How's that working for you? You know, if you read in Romans, you're going to read this. It says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful. This is out of Romans 12, by the way. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now, does that sound like today's society?
Nope.
No, sure doesn't. We're always seeking revenge. I look at this passage and I like that last part. It says, if he's thirsty, give him something to drink. If he's hungry, feed him. He said, by doing this, you're going to heap burning coals on his head. There's a new phrase for that. It's called kill him with kindness. He said, you know, when somebody's angry with you and you don't get angry back, it tears them up. Have you ever noticed that? If you just keep your calm and cool, say, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. They just get so mad. It's like, yeah, but da-da-da. I understand. I understand where you come. Try that sometime. You ever try it? Next time somebody gets angry with you, it eats them up because they want to fight. They want to fight when they can't fight with you. You say, I understand. That's a good point. I understand. I don't agree with it, but I understand where you're coming from. If you stay calm and don't get drawn into that anger, it kills them. So I found what that says is very true. But it also says don't take revenge. Don't take revenge. Leave that up to God. Leave that up to God. How many of us want to do it ourselves? You know, I'm a self-made man. I'm going to take that revenge myself, God. I got this. Why don't you take 5 minutes? I'm going to take care of this. It doesn't usually turn out like we think it is. It doesn't feel nearly as good as we thought it would. Leave it to God. Let Him take care of it. What about stubborn anger? Any of you ever had stubborn anger? It says this in Ephesians 4:26. It says, if you're angry, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. Now, what does that look like? Stubborn anger. That's kind of like when you come home from work and you had a bad day. And all of a sudden something happens. And you blow up. And then your spouse blows up back at you. Y'all both probably say things you don't mean. Now you're both in a huff. You avoid each other the rest of the night. Comes time for bed. You go to bed. You make sure they're not touching you. Turn your back to each other. Put a pillow between you. You know, whatever. Get your own blanket to make sure you're not even under the blanket with the person. You're just angry. Right? Some of you are smiling, so I know you've been there. But you don't even want to talk to them. Now, have you resolved anything? When you wake up in the morning, are you going to feel better? How many of you are going to sleep good that night? Probably not. So who are you hurting? You hurt yourself. You know, if you have a problem, you have an issue, here's the hardest thing. Stubborn anger is all about pride. It's like, I'm not going to be the wrong one. Even if I'm the wrong one, I'm not going to be the wrong one. I'm not going to be the first one to say what? I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry for what I said. I shouldn't have blown up at you. That's a pride thing. I ain't going to say that. She blew up at me too. I'm going to be right. Because it's more important to be right. Right? Than to have that relationship. But we harm our relationships like that. We should be able to go to each other and what? Talk. But you know what the verse said at the beginning? What did it say at the beginning? Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that opening verse. Where it said everyone should be quick to listen. Everybody should be quick to listen, slow to speak. How many of us are fast to speak and slow to listen? And it says we should be slower to be angry. You see, there's all types of anger. You can do a lot of things with it. You can let it beat you. You can let it defeat you. You can let it separate you from God. You can let it separate you from people. It's easy to do. Or you can let it work to motivate you to do something positive. You say, how can anger ever make me do something positive? I'll tell you. When I hear about human trafficking, I get angry. So it can motivate me to do something about it, right? To not just get angry about it. There's a story about Muhammad Ali when he was a child. He wasn't well off, but his mother had given him a bike. And somebody stole his bike. And he was so angry that he wanted to find the person and beat him up. And somebody said, well, it's a policeman right down there in the basement. Why don't you go talk to him? And he went down and told the policeman that somebody had stole his bike and he was going to find him. He was going to beat him up. The policeman said, okay. He said, do you even know how to fight? And he said, no. And so he said, you want to learn how to fight? Okay. So he taught him to box. And that's where his boxing career got started. That's why he learned it, because somebody stole his bike. And they never found the guy that stole his bike, but you know, Muhammad Ali became one of the greatest boxers of all time. And they asked him about that bike and how it had motivated him. He said, every time I got in the ring, I looked across the ring at my opponent and said, that's the guy who stole my bike. So sometimes our anger can properly channeled can be used to motivate us to do things that are positive for us. But they should never be things that are destructive for somebody else. Does that make sense? Now, we should never seek in our anger to harm somebody else. Sometimes we need to take a step back, cooling off period. There is a lady, Gilda Carly, who wrote a book, How to Manage Your Anger and Take Control. And she had a very simple 3-step thing to control your anger. First one was frame it, claim it, and tame it. Frame it, claim it, and tame it. Okay, and the first one was frame it, which is that when you get into a conflict, to take a step back. Frame what's going on. Think about what you're doing. Think about your response. When I was young, when I would get angry, I would go outside and I would pound on this ball, the basketball, and I would dribble, and I would dribble, and occasionally I'd take a shot, but I would dribble, just as hard as I could to calm down. The more I pounded that ball, the calmer I got. I wasn't nearly as angry. Not only that, it gave me time to think and evaluate what was actually going on and what exactly was it that was making me angry. And then what should I do about it? And the more I dribbled, the more I pounded that ball, the calmer I got. It was my release. As I got older, I can't do that anymore. You know, I can't do that. But now what I do is I go for a walk. I just go walk around the block, or I'll walk for a little while. It gives me time to think. You know, do you ever think that maybe you need time to think? Do you ever wonder if you took time to think, maybe you wouldn't say the things that you said? That maybe you would approach it from a different way? That maybe you would be able to see their point of view if you actually got the anger out of you and started looking and hearing what they said. Not what you heard, but what they said. Because oftentimes we hear things that are never said. They're just sometimes you think they're implied. But you never stop to ask them. Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that I'm bald? Well, no, I'm just saying you lack hair. You know, but there's always something. You need to hear what they're having to say. The other thing is to claim it. You need to recognize that you're angry and what it is you're angry about. What exactly is it that pushed your button? What is it that got to you? And recognize that that makes me mad. When you do that, that makes me angry, and then go back and talk to them about it. Right? If it's something that actually that bothers you so much that you're getting angry, then you need to come to terms with it one way or the other. And the best way is to go back and what? To talk about it, to discuss it. And don't go back, push it. Because when you push, what do? I push back. And what you should do is say, I heard this. Is that what you said? Is that what you meant? You see, I didn't say, you said this. I said, this is what I heard. Is that what you meant to say? Because that hurt me. Right? I feel like what you were saying was that I'm tall and geeky. Is that what you were implying? Is that what you were saying? You see, when you come at it not from an accusatory, but seeking to understand, sometimes we'll hear a whole different perspective of what was said. Does that make sense? So it's a lot of times reconciling this is how do you go about it? How do you approach what's made you angry? First, take a step back. Then try to realize what it is that's making you angry, and then come back and try to reconcile. Is that an easy thing to do? No, it's not. It's not. But it's a way of taking what's hurting us and reconciling it, and not holding it in. How many of you ever held something in? You know the danger with that, right? It's like a pressure cooker. At some point it's going to go off, right? You keep packing it down, and then boom, right? And you explode, right? It's kind of like, you remember them snakes, them spring snakes you put in the can? You go up to somebody, here, I open this, right? And all that pressure, and they open the can, and boom, and it pops out and scares them, right? Or startles them. Because you don't know what it is and which way it's going. Well, that's how people feel when you go off after you've been packing something down for a while. They don't know why you're mad. They just know you're mad. They don't know where you're going with this. They just know you're coming out, right? You know, and all of a sudden, you know, you pack it down, and all of a sudden you argue about, do you want pepperoni on a pizza? I don't like pepperoni. You've always liked pepperoni. No, you just always ordered pepperoni. I don't like pepperoni. You know, and the truth of the matter is, you're not really mad about pepperoni. You're mad because they haven't taken the trash out in a month. Right? Instead of saying, you know, I appreciate if you take the trash out. You pack it down and they do something else. And you pack it down, they do something else. You pack it down. Now we fight about pepperoni on pizza. Right? We got to use common sense, folks. We got to use common sense. We got to frame it, claim it, and what's the last one? Tame it. You got to know how to control yourself. You can't use I'm a redhead as an excuse. You can't say it's just my Cuban temper as an excuse, because that's not really an excuse. It is an excuse, but it's just, what it is it's a way of explaining our bad behavior away. And that's not what God calls us to do. You know, if we are angry, we need to make sure we're not angry at a person, but about something. And we need to be angry about something legitimate. Not just because I had a bad day at work, I need to be angry with somebody. It's okay to have a bad day at work. I think everybody would say I had a bad day at work. Most of us do at some point. Or I've had a bad day at home. Most of us do. Because bad days happen. But it doesn't mean you take it out on somebody in anger. Right? Right? Right, okay, just make sure you're still there. So we need to control the way we do things. Back it up. Back away from it. Take a step back is one of the biggest things you can do. And when you've done everything you can do, there's still one thing left you can do. Pray about it. Go to God with it. Spill your heart to God. Let Him know this hurt me. This person said this, and it's really cut me deep. Pam brought up a thing about how we seldom remember the good things, but we'll remember something that hurt us for a long, long time, won't we? Somebody can say something, and 10 years later, you can repeat it word for word what they said that hurt you, can't you? You know, 10 people can walk up and say, that's a beautiful dress. And one person can walk up and say, what was you thinking? Where did you think you were going today? And which one are you going to remember? The bad thing. You're not going to remember the 10 people who said, that's a beautiful dress. You look very nice. You look beautiful. Because something about us seeks to remember the bad. Isn't it? But that's not what God wants for us. God doesn't want us to be trapped by our anger. He doesn't want us to react to our anger in a way that's displeasing to Him. He wants us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and even slower to anger. That we should be at peace with Him. Not at peace with everything. But we shouldn't be the ones flying off the handle. We shouldn't be the ones giving hand gestures on the highway. It's not who we're called to be. You see, there's a peace that comes from knowing Christ. And the question is, do you know that peace? Because, see, what comes from knowing Christ is that you can go to Him about anything at any time. You can speak to Him. You can pray to Him. And He hears you. He's been on earth. Christ walked on earth. He knows that emotion. He's been angry. And He feels your pain. But no, being angry is not unchristian. It's what you do with that anger that can be unchristian. It's how you take it and how you behave. That's what determines whether your anger is sinful or not. You know, in Romans 12 it also says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Overcome evil with good. Somebody else say it with me. Overcome evil with good. And we all have that choice. We can repay evil with evil. But what's pleasing in God's eyes is to overcome evil with good. And all God's people said, Amen.